Hello, and my name is Peter Rushmer, and I'm your host today of a Half Dozen Things podcast. A Half Dozen Things is a podcast for business owners and professionals just like you. Whether you're an underdog hungry for success or you're already smashing it but want to continue to level up, we're here each week for you to get insight and learning from the very best in the business. No fluff, no BS, and no self-proclaimed gurus talking about how easy business or life is. Just real, frank, and raw conversations. So today's live or lunch live, thank you for joining with me, is around common mistakes that I see in fleet operators. So one of the things that Flagship do is carry out audits, and we regularly go into different operators as well, which is actually really a beneficial thing for us to be able to do, because we do get to see best practice. We get to see how a lot of different operators run their businesses, and we also get to see some really good ways of doing things, and also some challenges as well, where people sort of they mean to do well and sometimes have a few challenges. So, and we're able to help those people along with that, which is really important part and value add of what we can do, and what's worthwhile considering an audit, because in fact an audit is a vital part. It shouldn't just be done when one's been requested through regulatory action, for example. It should be something that a transport manager looks to do on a regular basis, make sure that the transport management system's working effectively. It's a good part of any management system is to make sure that it's tested and made sure that it works well. So it's always a good thing to consider, and usually we try and find ways that we can add value to operations in different ways, or give suggestions for ways that we can help people. So good afternoon, Martin, good to see you there again. Hope you're well. Hope you had a nice weekend. So yeah, we can have a bit of a look at the different mistakes that I see sort of commonly as we go around with operators. So to kick things off, the first one is around sort of infringements, driver infringements, and infringement management. So one of the things I mean by that is that a lot of operators do regularly make sure that they analyse drivers' hours, which is great, and they make sure that infringement reports are printed off. One thing's vital to remember is that we understand what they are and what they mean, but secondly, it's really important that we actually have a process to escalate those. So do we have a record of what drivers have received what infringements and how often they've received them, so that we're then able to escalate and make sure that we follow the process, or have a good quality process to follow to try and stop those happening, and that there's an education process in place. Thanks, Martin. Yeah, I have caught the sun a little bit, I think, so I appreciate it. Not quite as red as the jumper, sorry, Martin Jones has just commented, looks like I've caught the sun. And Tim Wilkinson, hello. Hi, Pete. How you doing, Tim? Hope you're keeping well. So one of the things is around infringement escalation. So do we have an agreed process in place to make sure that we handle infringements fairly as well? So how many strikes do you allow a driver to have the same infringement multiple times before you start to think about taking that to the next level? Remedial training, for example, would be the first step. And the second step might be a warning, because we've had remedial training, and the next step might be further remedial training, or more in-depth personalised remedial training, and before it becomes a written warning, for example. So how are we going to escalate that process? And I think that's something that we need to really consider and really know well, in case we do get audited, or as we actually follow the process, to ensure that we're managing drivers appropriately and effectively as well. The other one is around defects and rectification. So one of the things I see regularly is that drivers do their daily checks as part of the correct process, and they carry out defects, and then defects get rectified. But actually, there isn't like a really nice slick process where the two combine, so that we can go, yep, here's the defect and here's the rectification. So I really suggest considering that, to make sure that defects are getting rectified, and that we can basically have a good cross-referencing process, which is a really good way of being able to manage that defect process. One of the third challenge that I often see is around missing mileage. So there's a lot of operators who they will have missing mileage from service, but it may be that actually when you take a closer look, that actually it's the travel to or from the service, and that's important that we make sure that there's a driver card in the vehicle. Obviously, some vehicle repair shops are able to maybe road test the vehicle without a driver card in, but it's important that when the vehicle's being operated by the operator themselves, that to make sure that there's a driver card in at all times, so that can be analysed. And also with missing mileage, it's important to go through them and just make sure that you put notes against. Most software systems have an ability to be able to put in for what reason there might be missing mileage. It might be shunting in the yard or whatever it may be. It may be that it's in for maintenance, and it's an unrecognised driver that isn't on your software system. But it's important that we go back and we look at those and make sure we analyse them, and therefore, it may need checking against a tracker. You may have taken on a driver or used an agency driver that maybe hasn't got the correct understanding. So we need to be able to catch those and make sure we manage that process effectively, because it's very important that the vehicles aren't driven without cards in for hire and reward. That's going to be a big problem for you as an operator. The fourth area was around having old maintenance contracts. So one of the things that I pick up is that and it's not just old maintenance contracts, but sometimes operators will think that because a manufacturer or a garage has provided a contract as part of the maintenance process, that's sufficient. And actually, we need to make sure that we have a recent GV79 Annex D, which is the agreement between the operator and the maintenance provider, and to ensure that it's got everything on there around what the agreement is and how regularly vehicles are going to be inspected and what the notice period is, as well as what the expectations are around brake testing as well, which is sort of moving on to the maintenance element of some of the challenges I do see. And another thing I do often come across is that there's a woolly torque or retorque process, and it's important that we have both the tyres are regularly inspected, but we also have a good retorque process. And it may mean that there's a retorque book where we record any retorques and when they happened. But it's important to make sure that we have a record of making sure that wheels are getting retorqued and making sure that we have a procedure that's followed. And one of the things that's key is to remember that we cannot over torque wheel nuts as well. So we need to make sure that it's done professionally and using a calibrated tool, and also that it's recorded, and that after wheels have been off, that they follow that retorque process. It may be that the vehicle's left for 30 minutes before they're re-tightened or rechecked, or it may be that it's over a period of distance and rechecked, but we need to make sure that's properly recorded. And then if there are issues, because sometimes issues do happen where fleets come across loose wheel nuts, it might be an issue with the surface of the wheel, for example, that we make sure we really investigate that and make sure that we correct the process as we need to ensure that wheel nuts aren't loose, because it's a vital part of making sure that we operate safe vehicles. One of the other challenges I see is around brake tests. Now, I think there's a lot of operators out there who pay for brake tests with dealers or with workshops, and they've not been properly laden with weight, and that can be a challenge because essentially, if that brake test, some vehicles are exempt from being brake tested with weight, and there's lists online for you to see those exemptions, because it could be too inconvenient or too challenging. But ultimately, the vast majority of vehicles and trailers need to be weight tested as part of, or weighted as part of the brake test. We need to be aiming for at least 50% of the axle weight, and preferably over 65%. And one of the other things to check on the brake testing is to make sure that they're not just locking before the braking efficiency has been hit or the target braking efficiency has been hit. We need to make sure that we're hitting that braking efficiency and making sure that we've got good quality brake tests and that they're happening regularly. It's strongly advised on all of the documentation that you'll find online. It's now strongly advised that it's carried out at every PMI. And to make sure that they're properly carried out as well, because that's really vital to make sure that they're good quality brake tests and to ensure that our vehicles are safe on the road and making sure that they're braking appropriately as well. One of the challenges we see increasingly is that the modern tractor units carry out all the braking on behalf of the trailers, for example, so they can quickly become glazed and brake poorly, particularly if they're particularly if they're not being tested properly as well. So that can be a real challenge. Okay, so we then move on to sort of the HR. Some of the things that I notice and pick up for common areas of mistake. And one of them is around the employment contract. So often I come across employment contracts that have been copied and pasted or doctored and amended, and possibly not fit in the current legislation. So in May last year, there was a change of legislation, and employment contracts would have needed to have been updated. It's important that you get a good quality HR professional. If you don't already employ one, maybe subcontract one out to make sure that those contracts are fit for purpose and that they're effective. A good quality contract and handbook is vital, and it's something that is really important that you protect yourself and manage your business effectively. Whilst we're talking about the people side of things, I know we've already spoken about infringements, but one of the other things I pick up is ongoing CPD or continuing professional development for drivers as well. So vital part of fleet operations. So that may take the form of regular toolbox talks or team meetings, issuing of memos. It may be, like I say, ad hoc toolbox talk if needed, as well as making sure that things like gate checks are done to make sure that drivers are carrying out good daily walk-around checks. But keeping a record of ongoing CPD is vitally important for managing drivers effectively, and increasingly now, even driver CPC, managing it in advance, making sure that the courses aren't being duplicated, because we're coming across now where drivers who duplicate training courses unnecessarily may have the driving hours revoked from their CPC, and that's really a waste of everyone's time and money and effort. So it's important to manage these things up front, and it's a really good practice. Have regular driver meetings. I think it's good to make sure that we share business news, not just legislative changes and efficiency changes, but overall health and safety benefits as well for drivers. I think is vitally important. One of the other things that I pick up is effective license checking. So making sure that drivers get regular license checks as part of your ongoing management process, and to ensure that those with 6 points are sort of checked more regularly, and obviously making sure that drivers are notifying you and that you're able to notify the traffic commissioner as well. So those are, in a nutshell, those are some of the common mistakes that I certainly pick up on as part of our ongoing fleet auditing, and things that we work with our clients to be able to try and help with as well. One of the things I do recommend is having a copy of the Guide to Maintaining Roadworthiness. It's a fantastic document that's freely available online, and it really does tell you a lot of these things that I'm sort of talking about. To many operators, maybe like teaching you to suck eggs, but I do apologise if that's the case. But these are things that we come across regularly, and we always recommend revisiting the Guide to Maintaining Roadworthiness. Other ways that you can join the discussion is I host a Facebook group called the Transport Manager and Consultants Hub, which is on Facebook. And I also have a podcast, A Half Dozen Things. You may be listening on that, so please do tune in, and I'll be sharing more information there. And anyway, have a great week, everyone, and I hope you've enjoyed lunch today. So take care.